So, Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister of the UK, or the sad country I grew up in. Anyway, seeming as Sir Keir is pretty much universally hated at this point for being a big fat liar and being crowned the king of ultimately f***ing over this country on an unprecedented scale, this got me thinking. I know he had previously had a successful career in the legal sector, even holding the prestigious title of Director of Public Prosecutions. So if he can destroy an entire country in less than a year, what was his booming career like? And what did the skeletons in his closet look like? And honestly, I was pretty shocked to find out some of these. From a conviction of a guy for a tweet, to the post office scandal, and even to the big one, Jimmy Savile. This is the disturbing cases of Keir Starmer's legal career. But before we get into it, please like, comment and subscribe. It helps way more than you know. And if you're feeling extra spicy, then hit me up on Patreon, where you can get directly involved in my creation process. Cheers! So let me take you back to 2010. A guy named Paul Chambers made a joke on Twitter. He tweeted, "Robin Hood Airport is closed. You've got a week and a bit to get your shit together, otherwise I'm blowing the airport sky high." Bad joke? Probably. Terror threat? Really? I don't know. The South Yorkshire police didn't laugh anyway. They arrested him. This guy's career was essentially down the pan at this point. The Crown Prosecution Service charged him with sending a menacing message. Then things got even dumber. The CPS was ready to drop it. They told him they'd back off the appeal. Finally, some sanity. But then, our friend Keir Starmer steps in. At the time, he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, and he allegedly said, "Nope, keep going, let's fight this in court." Despite public outrage, despite legal experts calling it absurd, despite comedians, free speech groups, and thousands online calling it what it was, a joke, Chambers was dragged through multiple hearings, lost 2 jobs, gained a criminal record, taxpayers forked out £18,000 just to prosecute a tweet. All because Starmer reportedly refused to back down. Eventually, the High Court overturned this conviction years later, after Chambers had already paid the price. Was it about justice, or was it about protecting egos? This is what happens when people in charge fear embarrassment more than they value freedom. One bad joke, one powerful man, and a chilling message about where we're headed. Freedom of speech shouldn't depend on who's in the office. Does this sound a little familiar? You know what's worse than a dodgy printer? A dodgy prosecution. Enter Horizon, the post office's new, shiny IT system from 1999, which, let's be totally honest, has about as much intelligence as the current Labour Party. It started falsely accusing innocent postmasters of theft, and while Horizon was busy glitching like Windows 95 on a hangover, guess who was in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service? That's right, Keir Toolmaker Starmer. Between 2010 and 2013, under his watch, the CPS prosecuted 11 Horizon-related cases, and actually convicted 3 people. The software was about as reliable as a £3 USB from Wish claiming to be 16 terabytes. But still, convictions. Bravo, Mr. Keir. Now Starmer says he wasn't aware of the prosecutions. I mean, to be fair, the CPS only had his name on the building. So to his credit, he did later say, "I carry the can," which is like setting your kitchen on fire and then offering to hold the fire extinguisher after the house has been burnt down. Meanwhile, real people's lives were ruined, jobs lost, families broken, and tragically, some victims even took their own lives. Over 700 convictions and only 93 overturned so far. That's not justice, that's a scratch card with absolutely no winners. Now Starmer's calling it a huge injustice and demanding swift compensation, which is rich coming from the guy who could have stopped some of it but didn't, because, I don't know, maybe he was busy alphabeticizing legal briefs or something. I don't know what he did. So here's the big question. Was Starmer asleep at the wheel, or did he just read the error messages? Either way, if Horizon was the Titanic, Starmer might have been too busy polishing the deck chairs to notice they just hit a massive iceberg. Did you know Britain once responded to a mistaken identity like it was an action movie gone horribly wrong? Let's talk about the tragic and seriously controversial case of Jean-Charles de Menez and how Keir Starmer ended up in the legal mix. So in 2005, London is on the edge after the 7/7 bombings. Tensions are high, the police on full-blown red alert. Enter Jean-Charles, a 27-year-old Brazilian guy. Long story short, the police thought he was a suicide bomber for some reason. They followed him from his flat, let him get on a bus, then a train, and when he sat down on the carriage, garage, they pinned him to the floor and shot him 7 times in the head. 7 times in the head. No warning, no weapon, no bomb, just a guy trying to get to work. Now here's where things get properly British. Nobody gets charged. Instead of a criminal prosecution, the Met Police were hit with a health and safety violation. Yes, apparently, oops, we accidentally executed a commuter falls under the same legal category as leaving a wet floor sign in the cupboard. And Keir Starmer, he becomes Director of Public Prosecutions in 2008, 3 years after the shooting, but still signs off on a review saying there's not enough evidence to charge any individual officer. So while Jean's family mourned and the public shouted, "What?", the CPS shrugged and handed out a fine like it was a parking ticket. Critics say Starmer played it safe, protected the establishment essentially, and denied justice. Supporters say he was just sticking to the legal standard. Either way, it doesn't exactly scream man of the people, does it? Do you remember when protesting war crimes could land you in court faster than a speeding tear gas canister? Welcome to the EDO-MBM case, where arms dealers got protection and activists got silenced. And yes, Keir Starmer was once again involved. So EDO-MBM is a Brighton-based company that makes weapon components. Think bombs, targeting systems, the kind of gear that turns foreign policy into craters from above. Activists claimed their products were being used in illegal wars. Iraq, Afghanistan, you name it. So they protested loudly, regularly outside the factory, which is just democracy in action, but well, not so fast. In 2005, EDO-MBM went to court and got a sweeping injunction to restrict protests. We're talking about draconian stuff. Limits on who could protest, how many, where they stood, and even what they said. Now we're starting to feel British, aren't we? It was like health and safety met George Orwell. Enter Keir Starmer, again, then a high-profile human rights lawyer. But here's the twist. He wasn't defending the activists. No, he represented EDO-MBM. That's right, the arms company. Now Starmer's defenders say he was just doing his job as a barrister. Everyone deserves representation, which is true, but critics argue it's just a bit rich from a future Labour leader and self-styled defender of rights to help silence anti-war protesters on behalf of weapons contractors. The injunction, it was partially successful but widely condemned as a threat to free speech. So what was the takeaway of all this? When it came down to activists versus arms dealers, Keir Starmer chose the people building the bombs because nothing says progressive values like helping to shut down protests against blowing stuff up. Now this is something that doesn't get anywhere near enough attention. Key documents tied to Julian Assange's extradition were destroyed by the UK's Crown Prosecution Service, and a significant amount of that happened while Keir Starmer was in charge as Director of Public Prosecutions from 2008 to 2013. You know all this. We're talking about internal emails and communications between British prosecutors and their Swedish counterparts, including messages that could have been explained why the case against Assange was kept open for so long and why it dragged into a decade-long legal and political battle. One of the most controversial elements is that CPS officials under Starmer's leadership reportedly discouraged Swedish authorities from coming to the UK to question Assange in person. Sweden had initially considered interviewing him in London while he was under house arrest, which could have potentially resolved the matter far earlier, but the CPS in an email from 2011 told the Swedes, "Don't you dare get cold feet." That kind of language makes it clear there was pressure to keep the extradition route open even when alternatives existed. Fast forward to 2017 and we find out that key CPS records related to the case were deleted permanently. This included years of email chains that might have revealed who made certain decisions, why delays occurred, and what advice was given. The CPS claimed it was standard data retention policy, but for such a politically sensitive and high-profile case, many found that hard to believe. There was no independent investigation, no disciplinary action, nothing, and Keir Starmer, despite his senior position at the time, and the fact that much of this happened under his watch, has offered little to no comment on the matter. For someone who now presents himself as a champion of law, process and transparency, that silence and lack of accountability raises serious questions. But was it all mismanagement, or was the legal system being used to serve political interests? Either way, the public has never really gotten a straight answer, and I wouldn't put your house on it either. One of the most serious controversies linked to Keir Starmer's time as Director of Public Prosecutions involves the Crown Prosecution Service's failure to charge Jimmy Savile.
Police have announced they are widening their inquiry into alleged child abuse by the BBC presenter Sir Jimmy Savile. Detectives say they have established lines of inquiry involving living people that now require formal investigation. More than 200 potential victims have been identified and over 400 lines of inquiry are now being investigated.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome indeed to another edition of Jim Will Fix It. Because, wait a minute, how old are you?
12.
12? Hello, Judge. And how old are you?
11.
You're not married, are you?
No.
Oh, that's all right then. And before we press on, I'd like to show you a very fickle young lady, this one next to me here. You see this young lady here? I sort of said to her, do you want to come and sit with me on the beanbags? And she said, yes. And I said, you're not married, are you? And she said, oh, no. And she's just sitting here now and she says, my boyfriend's sitting down there watching me. What a two-timer, goodness gracious.
In 2009, several women came forward to report abuse by Jimmy Savile, with allegations stretching back decades. The case was reviewed by the Surrey police and they interviewed Savile under caution, but despite testimonies, the CPS under Starmer's leadership decided not to proceed with charges. Prosecutors said the victims were reluctant to support a prosecution and claimed there wasn't enough evidence. But after Savile died in 2011 and the full extent of his crimes came to light, hundreds of victims, including children, an independent review was launched. That review, led by Alison Levitt, QC, found that the decision to not prosecute was deeply flawed. The report said that victims had been treated with undue scepticism and there was enough evidence to consider charges. Starmer later issued a public apology where he carefully distanced himself from the decision and the case entirely, saying he didn't personally even handle the case. But still, as the head of the CPS at the time, critics argue that he bore ultimate responsibility for a system that failed spectacularly to protect vulnerable victims and hold a powerful man to account. It wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a complete systemic failure that led to a serial predator continue to abuse people for years and years, and Starmer's involvement, even if indirect, has never fully escaped scrutiny. Keir stood at the helm as one of the most egregious cases the UK has ever seen, a case that let down an entire generation of children, and the opportunity to bring justice to the country slipped away because of one man's ignorance or incompetence. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please smash like, comment and subscribe. If you really liked it, then maybe check out my Patreon, where I'll be hosting a variety of different ways you can get directly involved in the creation process and see your name in every video going forward. Bye.